located just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And we represent about 100 artists from across the United States in all media. And we have 7 exhibits schedules every year, where we have 3 concurrent exhibits that go on. And one of those exhibits is always a group show. And currently our group show is called Clever Birds. It's a fantastic show that is up until April 11th. And the show can be viewed in the gallery and online. The gallery is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 5, no appointment needed. But just to be careful, we decided not to have big, giant openings. So we're doing this virtual opening. And it's actually a really fantastic opportunity to get to see where the artists work and learn a little bit more about, more in detail than you might at a big, giant gathering. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to read a little bit actually first about Clever Birds and what we had in mind for this show. And this was written by Lauren Miller, actually, who's with us today, who's an associate at the gallery. And we're also joined today by Ann Orleski, who is the assistant gallery director. And I'm going to read this intro and then I'm going to introduce the artists. Few creatures have captured human imagination like those belonging to the Corvidae family. These highly intelligent and social birds are among the only animals who have been observed making and using tools and participating in complex rituals and games, owing in part to their incredible brain-to-body ratio, rivaled only by great apes and whales. While most are familiar with the largest species in this group, crows and ravens, their smaller cousins, jays, rooks, jackdaws, nutcrackers, and magpies too possess the family's unique intelligence and curiosity. Their ubiquity, being found on every continent and climate within the exception of the polar ice caps, has also given corn place in our collective consciousness, playing a significant role in nearly every culture's mythology and folklore. So what we're looking at now is a video of the installation in the gallery. We were not able to be joined by all of the artists today, but we are delighted to be joined by Ryan Myers, Barry Roll Carlson, Craig Clifford, Kelly Knoll, Mary Hood, Kelly Hopman, John Miller, Tim O'Neill, Alan Servas, and Debbie Kopinski. So what we're going to do today is we're going to keep looking at this video for a little bit and more people will be joining us. And then we've asked each of the artists to choose a particular piece from the exhibit to focus and tell us a bit about. We can either talk about the concept or the techniques, just give you a little bit more insight into how they work. If you have questions for any of these artists, you are welcome to at any point use the chat area or make a message on Facebook. This is being viewed on Facebook Live right now and through our website. And for anyone, if you're curious, this is also going to be taped and you'll be able to view it again later. So you're welcome to mention questions anytime throughout, and Lauren will be paying attention to those questions. If it seems extremely pertinent to the conversation, she may interrupt and ask your question right away. Otherwise, we will definitely get to all of your questions at the end of the artist presentations, and then open it up for a more informal Q&A. So thanks everybody for joining us. The first artist, Lauren, have we looked at the whole?
We're still watching the video right now.
We're still watching the video, so.
There's about 1 minute left.
So, and for anyone, if you haven't visited our gallery, it's in a beautiful old building that was built in the late 1800s, and it's a renovated tobacco warehouse. So not only is the art spectacular, but the building is a pretty great showcase for all of this beauty. So every piece that is in the exhibit is on the website. So, and we have good images. So if you're unable to visit the gallery in person, this video is available again, as well as images of all the works.
All right.
All right. So the first artist that we're going to talk to is Ryan Myers. Ryan is an artist and educator who has an MFA from the UW of Madison. He exhibits his work in galleries and art fairs across the United States. Ryan's subject matter is poised between the primitive and the contemporary. His figures have an archetypal quality while preserving a sense of modern life. Many of the objects, in Ryan's words, he says, many of the objects I create join the realms of sculpture and utility. I am not always concerned with quote unquote pretty, though I do believe that form, color, and shape are important. The notion of function in my work is important as well, but is not the primary focus. My vessels are created using a combination of thrown and hand building processes. So Ryan, thanks for joining us today and talk about this piece from the Clever Birds show.
Both pieces I made for this show, I wheel thrown the bottoms and altered them, and then the tops were hand built using pinch pots. They're fired at mid-range temperature, and I don't know, I lost my train of thought. I fired a kiln for 12 hours yesterday and then didn't sleep all night.
Oh.
Sure.
So, but what you fired was a wood kiln. Was this done in an electric kiln?
Yes, yeah, that was electric fired. I was pretty proud of these pieces because everything's going online. I made these in multiple parts, so they just stack, and coming up with new ways to make things easier to send and less likely to break. I thought the way I came up with these two worked well. And the birds could almost be interchangeable on either piece too. I don't know if you tried that at the gallery or not, but
Haven't yet.
We didn't, but now we're going to. Yeah. So birds and skulls are not they're not uncommon subject matter. So a lot of people are probably familiar with your work, but if they're not, we invited all sorts of artists who wanted to explore this subject matter, but this piece could normally fit into your body of work. So what in general have you been attracted to crows and ravens? What is that attraction?
I think part of it is just, the imagery is used often. I do like to watch birds. I'm not necessarily a bird watcher by any means, but we feed birds and, document what we see and, look things up and trying to teach our little girl, the different species and stuff like that. I just think it's interesting how intelligent they are, like you were talking about in the show description, and throughout everything, it's like crows are, a sign of cunning or death or doom. So I guess I use them more in with pieces that have an environmental influence, and most of those pieces are kind of doom and gloom and about our demise.
Well, now that you said that, I look at this piece and I start to think about, it's the human who's dead and the bird who's remaining, and
Yeah, I feel like we're our own worst enemy. So,
yeah.
But I also think about the skull as not a sign of death necessarily, just like a object to represent time and time passing and changing. So I try not to make anything too blatant, one directional, so people can interpret their own idea around it. And sometimes I make pieces and I have no clue, I'm just putting parts together and then statement comes after it's finished. So
Yeah. That's
Great.
great. Okay. Thanks, Ryan. And hang around however long you want to. I know that you have someplace else to be today, so if you have to leave before the Q&A, but I'm really glad that you took the time to join us today. Thanks.
if there's any questions, written questions, I can come back later and respond to.
Okay,
So.
great. Hey, thanks, Ryan. So this next piece we're looking at is by Barry Roll Carlson. Barry has an MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a BFA from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Barry's commitment to the arts is impressive. In addition to his studio practice, he is a well-respected instructor, lecturer, and art organizer. He's been integral in the formation of groups like Big Tent Project and Vox Populi, a national print collective. And this is a quote that I took that I liked of yours, Barry. In a broader sense, I want to convey the physical and psychological impact the landscape has in shaping people. A sense of place is powerful. It can express the feelings of belonging, separation, distance, and loss. Can the landscape be the physical embodiment of an idea or concept or personification? I believe so, landscape as avatar. So Barry, your work doesn't always have birds in it, but your landscape that you're very known for is in this. So tell us how you approached this different than you might have some of your other works.
Yeah, I was actually, when I was first invited to participate, I almost said no, but then I thought, I really need to broaden myself a little bit and not be reliant on repeating the motifs that I'm used to over and over again. So I invited this, and I had been reading a book about Vikings at the time that I was invited, and there was a couple of ravens that Odin has, and they sit on his shoulders, and their names are Hugin and Munin, and they go out into the world and they survey it and bring back information to him. And this is the way that this started, I guess, was in that kind of vein, but it moved away from the heathen mythology toward it just being something I kind of identified with some experiences I'd had, not in this context necessarily, but with corvids. Once hiking in the Rocky Mountains, we were resting, and a gray jay came down and visited us in our camp, and it got so bold that it literally came and like stole someone's lunch. And then another time we were in England at the Tower of London, and I just first saw up close the size of ravens there, and they're very domesticated. And I was just thinking about how these birds have become so used to interacting with people, and how our lives are sort of, interlaced with them when you use them as metaphorical vehicles too. But this context here, I don't do too many daytime pieces, but I had this secluded lake idea, and the light kind of washing through all these fir trees. And the idea that there are two people unaware of these ravens on the path, and the ravens having a conversation, maybe about them, or figuring that there's this kind of mirroring of couples too. So in a certain sense, this painting is about discovery, I suppose, where the second painting, which isn't pictured here as you went through the gallery, is more about loss and someone searching for something in the nighttime. So it's kind of these are sort of dualities or reciprocal paintings in the sense of finding and losing something in your life. So
Well, and something people might not know just from looking at this, we don't always show the frames that the paintings are in when we're showing these images, but you make all your frames.
Yeah.
And when did you start doing that, and why did that become such an important thing for you to have control over?
I think I did that, I'll tell you quite honestly, at the very beginning, because I was a cheapskate, and I made some very unimpressive frames. But then when I started to kind of get into them and finding some other artists, that too many to name probably, that have used, if not ornate frames, something customized to the painting, and not just something that's kind of tacked on afterwards as an afterthought. It became a way for me to kind of connect with some of the craft background. My father was a bricklayer, and I always say it's harder to make a brick frame, so I started working with wood. But this is one of the more simplified frames. It's more just a beveled surface. Sometimes in the other painting there was a little bit of carving, but oftentimes are architecturally formed. So the shape of the canvas might not be completely rectangular.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I see it as a connection to objects and craft.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, yours is no one ever asks to reframe one of your paintings.
That has happened.
Has
Somebody
it?
had to do one in gold once, and I just thought, okay, fine, I'll take the frame back.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow. That's great. Well, thank you, Barry.
Sure.
This is work by Craig Clifford, and Craig has an MFA from Louisiana State University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a BFA from the California State University, Long Beach. And he currently teaches at the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh as an assistant professor of art in ceramics and foundations. He has exhibited internationally and has work in collections, including the American Museum of Ceramics and the Shanghai Art and Craft Museum. And Craig, you say as an artist, you're interested in where high and low culture intersect and how images carry meaning within a society that consumes a huge amount of visual information. So thank you for participating in this show, and talk to us about your work.
Well, it's a red-winged blackbird. I've been a birder for probably about the past 10 years, I suppose, give or take. And I never really cared about red-winged blackbirds until I moved to Wisconsin. Because here in Wisconsin, you know, I'm always looking forward to the snow melting and spring coming. And so when I see a red-winged blackbird on my way to school or my way to work, I know spring is almost here. So it's a very exciting moment for me when I see the first one. And I'm actually even on a bunch of birding web groups on Facebook, and all over they'll always say, I saw the first red-winged blackbird today. And then everybody gets excited because, you know, it's the first bird of the spring. And I've always been amazed at how good they are at actually predicting like the last snow or the last cold weather. Maybe you'll get a little bit here and there, but once I see them, I know it's going to be pretty warm from that day forward, other than a random day here and there. So with this work, what I did, I kind of made a little kind of a smaller piece of it. So it's a throne plate. Why they are still green. My daughter wanted everybody to know she drew the sailboat on here, but why it's still green, which means it hasn't been fired or anything like that yet. I paint the whole surface black on this particular one. Then I come back in and I draw in my image, my words, whatever I want it to be. And then it's more or less just like a reductive drawing from that point. So I have my tools and, you know, I just take away everything that isn't my bird or whatever I want to do. I take away everything else around my drawing. And then I'd go back and paint, you know, and probably during this time, I don't really use, only crow type imagery I use on a regular basis would be a yellow-headed blackbird. But I wanted to do some different things, and I was looking forward to the cold weather being done and it warming up. So it just made me think about this particular bird.
And
So do you have to? No, go ahead, Lauren.
red-winged blackbirds are interesting because they look a lot like blackbirds and crows, and actually neither blackbirds nor red-winged blackbirds are in the Corvidae family, but they're often mistaken for being so, partially because of their kind of cleverness and their fearlessness with humans. I know a lot of people will walk through botanical gardens and get dive bombed by the nesting red-winged blackbirds. They're very territorial.
We were just talking about that today on our walk. I also just learned fairly recently that the bigger the arm, the bigger the wing patch,
Mhm.
the more dominant the male is, and the smaller the pats, the less dominant. So when they have the red and the yellow, they tend to be the more dominant of the males.
Well, I've been
Interesting.
pecked on the head many times by those riding
Yeah.
bikes and walking.
So
Hey,
Craig, have you seen a red-winged blackbird this season?
Oh yeah. I saw probably my first one maybe about 10 days ago. I know other people had seen them before that, but I saw my first one then.
There's a lot
And
by the river.
yeah, now they're pretty common here in Appleton right now.
Hey, Craig, when you're doing this, do you sketch it out? Do you know exactly like, I'm going to have this word here and I'm going to do that? Or are you winging it a little bit? No pun
Well,
intended.
the bird I will always draw first until I get to the point where I'm happy with it. I really started drawing birds. I don't draw a lot, quite honestly. I doodle, but I'm not one to really draw a lot. But then I found that if I knew I was going to a certain area to hopefully find a certain type of bird, especially if it's something like a different type of sparrow or something that isn't really easy to tell the difference. If I would draw them first before I went, it helped me to identify them when I got there. And or I just started drawing birds that I really wanted to see. So it was really started that way more than to draw on ceramics. So I'll draw the bird first, and everything else I'll just I'll use your pun, Teresa. Everything else I just wing as I go. So but sometimes I get the scale wrong and it doesn't fit the way I want it to, or so there are mistakes, but that I don't worry too much about them.
Yeah. Hey, Mary Hood just made a comment. She said she loves your shirt, and I thought, yeah, let's talk about your shirt
Well,
for a second. That's pretty great.
Debbie mentioned that we both look like slobs, and then
We got our
we
hoodies.
both
Hey,
have our
Debbie.
hoodies and t-shirts, and we both look like slobs. And so I said I'm gonna go put on my bird shirt because I don't get that often. I don't get I mean, it's kind of a loud shirt, so I don't wear it on a regular basis. And so I thought this would be a good the perfect occasion to wear it. Sometimes I'll
So-
wear it on the last day of school as my celebration shirt, but
That's great.
He got me a bird shirt too, but I like his better.
Well, I'm wondering, I was thinking, are you going to trade off? And then when Debbie talks about her piece, do you get to wear the shirt, or,
I have my own, but I don't know. It's just more like lady frilly, and the birds get lost. This is more bird.
Okay.
this is a nicer
Right.
cut.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Okay, next up is Kelly Knoll. Kelly, I'm pronouncing your name right, am I not?
You are. It's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, we are so pleased that you're joining us at Abel Contemporary, because this is the first time that we're showing any of your wonderful work, which was just perfect for this show. And we can thank Glynis Lessing because she brought your work to our attention, another wonderful ceramicist. So Kelly has an MFA from San Francisco State University and a BFA from the University of Montana, Missoula, cum laude. You are currently a professor of art at Carleton College. You have been awarded winning artist and you have exhibited your work across the United States. And one of the quotes that I read about your work that I liked a lot was, "Rabbits, crows, and other animals perform much like human beings in my work, exposing vulnerabilities and tendencies through the gesture of ears, wings, hands, and bodies. As humans, we love to go into nature, forgetting that we are, in fact, part of nature." So thank you, Kelly, and tell us about your work.
Oh, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you very much for including me in the show. It's awfully nice to meet all of you, and it's a beautiful show and a beautiful space, and I hope to see it in person someday soon. Someday we can all gather again.
Yes, yeah.
So I'll just say a little bit about how I started making crows. In 1999, I was walking through Loring Park in Minneapolis, and the West Nile virus had made its way through Minneapolis, and there were a number of dead crows in the park. And I don't know if West Nile virus happened in Wisconsin as well, but it just ravaged the crow population here. And so I got to witness crows having crow funerals for their fallen friends, and also got to really look closely at a crow because there were so many dead crows. And that sparked my curiosity. I had had a accidental pet magpie when I was a kid. My dog in rural Montana captured a magpie and injured it, and so we put it in our rabbit cage and tried to nurse it back to health, and it was the meanest creature I had ever known, but was really magical. And magpies are terrifically beautiful animals, just such stark, bright white and black. And so then seeing these dead crows gave me an opportunity to just look very closely at them. And so I made a series of crows like 1999, 2000, and then went on to make other things and came back to crows in 2010 when my partner at the time, now wife, was pregnant with our twins. And I wanted to think a bit about crows as a way of, in the same way that they were mourning a fallen bird, to think about surrounding our developing twins in our community, in this phenomena of nature. And so I made a big nest with 2 eggs in it, and then a murder of crows. So that was murder number 1. And then in the last year or so, I made murder number 2. And this is a small piece of that bigger installation. So that was about 80 crows that filled an elevator shaft, along with a big installation of butterflies and red thread. And I guess as an artist, what I'm drawn to is creating spaces that as a viewer, you enter into that space. And so these smaller vignettes or little sculptures are kind of part of something a lot bigger, and this just becomes one element of it. When I started looking at crows 20 years ago, one of the things that fascinated me most is, unlike most other animals, especially birds, gender is not something you can readily see in crows, that male and female crows look identical. And they are, as so many folks have said, they're remarkably smart creatures. And they mate for life, which helped me understand a little bit more of that funeral procession that I witnessed in Loring Park so long ago. And so as a person who's married to another woman, I love that ambiguity of their gender that's presented in the way that they look, and that often I pair them. I think it was Barry who talked about the 2 birds on the in the painting of being kind of partners together. And to me, these birds are having a pretty elaborate conversation that we get to kind of witness, but not participate in completely. And I love that relationship to nature, that kind of participating in, but also being outside of. So that's a little bit why I make crows.
Yeah, that's a great, kind of powerful story about Loring Park. And I want to mention to people that one of the things that struck me first when we started to look at your work was on your website, you have some stunning pictures of the installation that this is a larger piece of. So if people Google you, or we can put a link later to that website maybe, because it looked just like a stunning install.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was beautiful. When I was invited to participate in a show in this beautiful space called Karma building in Northeast Minneapolis, and there were 7 artists, and we were all looking around the building, and there was this elevator shaft that was just being used as storage. And as everybody was selecting their area in the building, I just kept coming back to that elevator shaft and said, can I have that? Can I just take over that space? And it was just the prettiest place I've ever
Wow.
worked with. Yeah.
Well, we have an elevator shaft at the gallery. Well, it's not really a shaft, it's a hole in the floor, but it's an it's a tobacco lift. So
oh my gosh. Oh,
we'll
Teresa, that's my dream.
We'll have to talk. So
yeah. Oh my gosh, that'd be great.
That's great. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Next up is Mary Hood. Mary Hood is originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, currently residing in Arizona, where she is an associate professor at Arizona State University in Tempe. She teaches intaglio and digital processes for printmaking. She previously taught at Carnegie Mellon University and the University of North Texas, respectively, as a visiting assistant professor. Public collections, she is in public collections internationally, and as part of Mary's teaching philosophy, she focuses on the idea of the democracy of printmaking, the distribution of individual voices, and the collective impact of community-affiliated projects. Mary, thank you for joining us. Mary and I are also old friends, and we met many decades ago. And when we had the gallery, we had lost touch, but I remembered that Mary was such a dynamic artist. And when we reconnected over a decade ago, I was right, and you're just doing marvelous work. So tell us about this piece, Mary.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me to the show. And it's so nice to see all of your faces. It's really lovely. This piece is a really interesting piece, and it's kind of a unique piece in that I was invited to be a participant in a portfolio exchange. And actually this wasn't a portfolio exchange. I was invited to be part of a project that was answering a very specific topic. And the topic was it was from a show called Rewriting History, which was curated by John Hitchcock from UW-Madison. And the show was addressing the transport of Native Americans to a prison in St. Augustine. And then a massacre happened at that prison in St. Augustine. And we were all given the prompt to like research this event and come up with our own response to it. And there's a really great website for the whole project called Rewriting, not rewriting, but rewriting history, and lots of fabulous artists in the show and lots of fabulous pieces in the show. So this was my contribution to that project. And this is the prison or the fort in St. Augustine. I think it's called Fort Marion. And I wanted to respond to the place, and I had just right before I was invited to participate in this, I had traveled to Poland, and I had just visited Auschwitz. And when I was in Auschwitz, I had, besides, that sickening feeling of being in such a horrific place, but also I had this like tremendous feeling that nobody was there anymore, that everyone had gone, that all the souls were gone.
Oh.
And no one was lingering there. And I felt it really, really strongly. And then as I was thinking about this, I thought the same thing. I thought, I hope their souls aren't there. I hope they've gone. So it was 72 prisoners, and those are 72 birds that are in the sky there. And so I use the birds and to symbolize that sense of freedom, or that sense of transportation from one space to another space. And, from one space of trauma, which this was obviously a space of trauma in the same way that Auschwitz was a space of trauma, to a space of liberation and freedom. And wherever that space may be, I don't know, but it's more of an abstract space, or a philosophical space, if you will. And so I applied that same kind of feeling that I had from being in Auschwitz to this narrative. And then on the left side, there's little holes that I put into the piece, and that's meant to reference ledger paper. So the first paper that most natives were introduced to was ledger paper that came from soldiers. And And so it's a reference to that. And there's also like a really large number of Native American artists who are considered ledger artists, whose work is in response to the ledger, like tallying, the white man's tallying of whatever it is that they're tallying. So this piece is called After the Count. And it was after the count, like after the head count. You know, in a prison, there would always be a daily head count. So this would have been after the head count, where these 72 souls would have been liberated. And so how I made the piece is really kind of fun. And I can actually take you on a short little tour if you want. I'm at the university right now, and I'm laser engraving a piece on the laser. But this piece, I printed this. I printed the paper. The paper is this tan color, but I printed the paper with that silver color. So I just did what's called a monoprint. Well, actually, I just printed the whole sheet, that flat silver color. And then I used the laser, and I laser engraved off the ink from the paper. So you can set the laser to do like incredibly sensitive and delicate things, or cut through 1/2-inch wood. You know, if I use the same settings on paper, it would have a fire and there would be no more paper left. But so I just laser engraved off the image from a digital file that I sent to the printer. And then the birds are all little hand cut, or not hand cut, sorry, laser cut birds that I hand painted and then attached to it. So those are collé elements.
Wow.
So
So
for people who don't know, explain what collé is.
Collage.
Okay.
Like collé collage.
Yeah,
Tomato.
Mary, can I ask you, so you basically had a sheet of metallic ink, and then the laser just vaporized like a tattoo being removed, kind of like
Yeah.
vaporized the ink. Interesting.
Yeah.
But it didn't scar the paper at all. I mean,
It's fascinating. If you engrave directly onto a blank sheet of paper, it'll burn the paper. But if you are engraving onto a piece of paper and vaporizing the ink off, it doesn't burn the paper.
wow.
And I learned that by accident, but then once I learned it, I was like, ooh, that's cool. So
I was sure as a photogravure when I saw it, but that's
it's not a photogravure. Yeah.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And it's the same thing that I did on the print for the Devil's Dictionary exchange that you organized.
Yeah.
The laser work on there is just lasering off the ink, and feeling the paper underneath.
Oh my, we'll talk more about that. That's to me.
And come do a workshop.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Oh, Mary, what a beautiful description of the piece.
Thanks.
I mean, it's visually beautiful, but hearing the inspiration and the story behind it, you know, you've managed to make this thing that's both incredibly beautiful and poignant and sad as well. And it's really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think beauty plays a really big role in my work. Actually right now, my main objective after a year of lockdown and like just this last year, which has been so incredibly difficult, is just to make some things that are beautiful. Like that's my primary objective right now. I just want to make something pretty.
Yeah.
And I feel so naughty, you know, and like, you know, but this is the goal at the moment. But beauty can kind of, you know, deliver a message in a way that I think can make it, it's not a topic that's difficult, maybe more palatable, or give us more concern as opposed to allowing the viewer to give it more concern. They kind of draw you in as opposed to like, you know,
Confrontational.
comfort. Yeah. Like I use beauty as almost in a subversive way.
Yeah.
But
No,
the
it's smart,
pieces
yeah.
I'm working on now are just pretty because I want them to be pretty.
That's great. This little lead in, and we're gonna move on, but it makes me think at the end, when we open the Q&A, we're gonna turn all your mics on as well. And all of you artists, if you want to, can sit and like sort of chat with each other too about all these things.
Great.
Okay, so this painting is a fabulous little painting by Kelly Hopman. Kelly has been producing beautiful, relevant, and thought-provoking paintings for over 3 decades. She is a Madison native and has been a professional artist her entire adult life, and over the years has created a distinctive style inhabited by a cast of characters all her own, who play out dramas that explore the human condition. Last year, Abel Contemporary featured Kelly's latest body of work, which was a beautiful, huge body of work that took a number of years to create. It was called The Party. It included fabulous paintings and also Kelly's first venture into sculptures. So go to our website and there's lots of pictures of that show, videos of that install, and you can see more of her work. So Kelly, thanks for joining us and talk to us. You've also used birds a lot in your work, so you were an easy fit for this show, but tell us about this piece.
Well, I mean, I use crows all the time, so, and it's because they're around all the time. You know, every time you go outside, there's a crow, winter, spring, summer, fall, there's always crows around. So it was pretty easy to have one of my girls have a little crow for a pet. And I often turn birds into people. So my birds morph and they become people. And the crow is sort of the little black dress of my characters, and it has a lot of different meanings. It can be like, to me, it's fate, it's the cycle of life, because crows eat dead things, you know, like the rabbit will be its dinner, and they clean up, and they're smart, like the rest of the people have noticed, but they're communicative. They have more language than any other bird. They use tools, unlike, you know, I mean, they're very, if a bird took over the world, it would be the crow. So this morning on my little walk, I saw a bunch of crows chasing a hawk, because often crows will bother bigger predators. So if you hear a big squawk of crows, they'll be chasing a hawk or an eagle or an osprey, and usually the larger predator bird can kill a crow, but they don't want to waste the energy on it. So I don't know why the crows are really out there chasing them around particularly, but they are. And I don't know, they're a super easy bird to love and to use as a symbol, and they're beautiful and charming and interesting, and who doesn't want a good crow?
Who doesn't? I feel like I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate this. Like because they are characters in your work a lot, I feel like they're always like underestimated too.
Mm.
Like they symbolize kind of they're just sort of somber, and they're beautiful, and they might be at the party and they're in the corner and they don't need to draw attention to themselves, but they're always being sort of overlooked at how clever and beautiful they would be. I mean, do you think about that? Or is that just something that
Well, they're always there. Like I will go for a walk every morning, and there's always a crow. There's not always a warbler. There's
Right.
not always an eagle. There's always a squirrel. I mean, I guess I could be, you know, painting squirrels every day, but I don't. They don't seem quite as interesting, although the squirrel, it can be a clever animal. I think they're so common we forget to see them. or many people forget to see them or appreciate who they are, or they become just, oh, a crow, it's like, oh, a sparrow. But they're so essential to the environment and the interactions with all the other birds and the animals. And I mean, they're essential, but they're so common. We just go, "Meh."
But I feel like artists are particularly drawn to ravens and crows. Lots of artists. Sort of interesting.
Well, they're a good shape for sure. I mean, they're easy to use in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Lauren, do you think it's true that that artists historically have been drawn to crows and ravens?
Yeah, I would think so. I'm trying to think of some really early images of crows, and I'm drawing some blanks there. But you do see them in, I wouldn't say Paleolithic art, but early art, pretty much worldwide. I mean, you see them, I mean, because they are so ubiquitous. There are crows in Australia, and there are crows in Canada, and the middle of Russia. Like, they're everywhere, and we've all had interactions with them, and they are so interactive with people because they are so curious about us, and we have things they want. They want our food, our shiny things, our garbage. They want to interact with us.
Yeah.
And I guess there is this connection between the artist and the crow that almost makes the crow seem like an artist in itself, a figure that could stand in for the artist, which is interesting because, I mean, mostly all birds will make nests and stuff. So we kind of see this like craftsmanship and carpentership, but there's something kind of ingenious that I think we see in crows and other corvids that is like, it's kind of this glint in the eye that you see in Kelly's bird, that there's just, there's more there. They're thinking, they're having thoughts. Like, I've seen studies that have proven scientifically that crows can have existential thoughts. They can think about themselves and existence, which is pretty spectacular. Like, that this creature that is everywhere is having these thoughts that we humans kind of selfishly think that we only have.
Great. Thanks, Kel. And thanks for the beautiful work. So next up, this is another print, a fabulous print by John Miller. John, my notes here. John is a Madison artist, a printmaker who works in multiple kinds of printmaking techniques, and also pushes prints by making three-dimensional prints as well. So if you're ever in the gallery, please check those out. John is well regarded for his technical abilities as an artist that are informed by his knowledge and keen observations of the natural world. John is an avid boatsman and one who spends an enormous amount of time in wild areas. John believes that through making art, he can better understand the world and his place in it, and hopes to inspire a more nuanced perspective in a viewer. And here's a quote I liked of yours, John. "When I try to make something that pays tribute to what I think I'm seeing, I'm very much aware of how much I don't know," which I think is very, because when one talks to you about your subjects, whether it's water or a mountain or a bird, you're incredibly knowledgeable. So thanks for being here, and tell us about this piece or your work in general.
Well, I wanted to talk about this piece for a number of different reasons, but one of them is because ravens have been important to me since I was a little kid. And they're probably the first of the corvids that I was really aware of. I mean, I grew up with blue jays in my area and crows, but it was really the raven of the wild spaces that probably first impressed me. And in part because it was really apparent that they were highly intelligent, but they were existing out in the wild, and they were often more individual than the crows. Crows are often found together in bigger groups. And so there's something about the independence, sort of a self-sufficiency of the raven that really appealed to me. So in thinking about this piece, so the raven was the first of the images that I wanted to make. And there were all kinds of ideas I had for more pieces for this corvid show. But since the raven was the first of the corvids that really inspired me, and as a kid, I was so aware of the origin myths of Native Americans and mythologies from around the world that used the raven as a really prominent character. And I was aware of the raven as a highly intelligent bird with personality. I have been with friends sitting on a cliff face when a raven came gliding by using the updrafts, and it did a barrel roll right in front of us, giving out a croak, and then flips back to its gliding phase and just carries on, almost as though it did that to show off for us. You know, it was timed so perfectly. And so I wanted to present the raven of biology and natural history, but also give a nod to the raven of mythology. And so what I did was I tried to figure out a position, a look, a glint in the eye that seemed to project personality, intelligence, and sort of a life presence for the bird that I'm showing you here. And I wanted the bird to be looking back out towards the viewer. But my attempt to give the nod to the bird of mythology was to concoct a perspective that's absolutely impossible for a human being to have. You cannot be yourself. To see this bird from this perspective, up close and personal like this, there's no way that you'd be up in the tree. There's no way that the bird would be cocking its head over its shoulder like this, unafraid, just aware, meeting your eye. So you have to be an imagined self. And I don't care how you picture yourself, but you are an imagined self. And the imagined self is really the realm of mythology. That's where mythology starts. We create mythologies to tell stories about our own self-importance, our relation to the cosmos, origin myths, all kinds of stuff that have to do with way more than what we actually are. It's it's really an imaginative world, and I don't want to denigrate it as though there's not something really important there. But what I wanted to do was present the raven in, sort of my style, which, it's not like photographic or anything. I'm working with all these flats, but I didn't want to do as much to the bird as I wanted to do to you, the viewer looking at it. So then on the other side, and this is John Miller as the artist being trickster and trying to kind of pull a fast one, I wanted to create ambient space in one color and not give you much to look at. So when you see this, just by not printing in some places, I've created a space that has 3 dimensions. It's got a wall of trees, a horizontal plane, a water course going through it, and even possibly some spindly little trees in what would be a boggy environment. And it's just pictorial space. Doesn't matter how hard you look, how much you study that, you cannot see details. That's part of what I consider to be the magic of the creative process. I love work where I can take a flat and create space pictorially, or take a flat and create volumetric space. And so in this case, then you're sandwiching that bird between you, the imagined self, and a sleight of hand trick that is pictorial space. And one of the things I also like about art is that unlike sleight of hand magic that's done on stage, you can see what the trick is and it still works, and it'll work forever as long as you keep looking at it. And that's not the same thing for, say, the sleight of hand work where once the trick is revealed, it's no longer as exciting to see. You can sort of marvel at how quickly someone does something with their hands, but it doesn't work the same way. And so this was my attempt to sandwich that bird between two sort of magical ideas to give it more than what you might at first think you're looking at, and supply and energy that's sort of more than what it is in some respects. So, oh, but then since I didn't get the hook, right? Because my 5 minutes is not.
You haven't. You
So,
haven't.
but then I
got time.
did want to show you this. This is my gray jay I'm working on. So this is a paper gray jay, and this is taking flat forms and creating a, you know, a bird.
Hey, Lauren, can you make that John larger on the screen? Is that so we can see that closer?
Sure. 1 second. Just got to escape out of my.
Or am I
share.
screwing everything up?
Not everything.
Sorry. I just want to see it closer.
Yeah. You see that better?
It's so cool, John.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that once I can work all the bugs out, I'll have, you know, the gray jay in the gallery too sometime later. So
Great.
anyway,
That's fantastic.
that's all I've got.
That's a great, what a fabulous description. I feel like I learned so much about the piece, and yeah, it's just what I would expect of you. Such a thoughtful description about every little detail that you do. Thanks, John.
Yeah, and one other thing about this piece that I don't think we've mentioned yet is the title is Gagagi, which is Ojibwe for the raven, which is kind of this, I love it just because it's such a phonetic name. It sounds a lot like the call of the raven, which is, I don't know, it's so delightful to say. I find myself just kind of saying it to myself sometimes.
You know, I think that also like how you say it, like gagagi.
Yeah.
Gagagi. You know, and it can be the different raven sounds, but it's this cadence and everything. So
Yeah. Great. Good. All right. Next up is Wendy Olson. Wendy lives in River Falls, Wisconsin, where she and her husband, Jay Jensen, have a studio. She teaches ceramics full-time at Inver Hills Community College in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota. Wendy received her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting from the University of Wisconsin River Falls and her Master's of Fine Arts in Ceramics from Kent State University in Ohio. The content of Wendy Olson's work is a visual journey of her life. Her most recent body of work is influenced by the ideas of layers in her life. This transfers to Olson's work in layers of shapes, images, narrative, and meaning. With these layers comes ideas of duality, past, present, forces of good and evil, and duality as it exists in people and in life. Wendy, thanks for joining us and being in this show. And I love these sculptures that you made for the Clever Birds show. So join us and tell us about your work.
Well, it's nice to see everybody, on some familiar faces, some not so familiar faces, and just to hear all of your stories and see of your work and hear you talking about it. So with the crows and the work I was making for the show, I have to go back to around 1998 when I was in Kent State, Ohio, going to graduate school. I had a window in my space, and that was the first time I really paid attention to crows, or birds really for that matter. And I was sitting there looking out my window, and I watched a crow pull out a bag of McDonald's out of a garbage can, and McDonald's was really close, and kind of dumped out the contents. And then like something must have come out, and it caught out to other crows, and then they came in a group and ate. And I kind of watched this for a while, and then maybe a couple days, and then I started making little crow sculptures and putting them out on the sidewalk near that garbage can, near the bus stop. And I would sit there with a camera all day waiting for people to acknowledge the fake crow on the ground. And they were realistic enough that people were like, one woman in a mini skirt kicked it. That was fun because it hurt. And so there were like all these things. I did like this kind of photographic, journal basically of people interacting with these fake crows that I was making. And also there's a 15-story library at Kent State. And I went over and checked out all these books about crows, about, poems about crows, like everything I get my hands on to really understand what I was observing. And, I found out that they're one of the few bird families that have extended families. And that when there was a bounty on them, like in the 60s, it was really hard to shoot them because they would warn each other. And I was just really kind of attached to that idea. So fast forward to Lauren contacting me about this show. I'm stuck in COVID, of course, like everybody else, with 2 teenagers in the house. And one of them, my son Elliot, really took to the birds. So our deck, we live on 3 acres next to 600 acres of county property. So we have an abundance of birds out in the country here in Wisconsin. And Elliot spent one whole day training a hummingbird to land on his hand. And then he got started photographing birds in the bird feeder using my tripods, all my stuff, of course. But he got a great photo of a tagged tufted titmouse in the feeder. And so I started feeding the birds because Elliot was really so into this. And also because the window looks out, my window in my living room looks out onto a deck where we attract so many different birds. And so we really started feeding them, and I tried to attract the crow. I have attracted every single bird in the forest except for the crow. I've not seen a single one land anywhere near my house, but I hear them in the woods all the time. So when I walk, I hear them. I see traces of them. I just don't see them. I see blue jays, cardinals, just not the crow that I want to see. Of course not. But I did play around with that idea because I thought if I could think like the crow, I mean, I already dress like the crow usually. I wore something else today, but usually I'm dressed in black. And I thought, yes, I can get the crow to come to me. But I was totally wrong. It's like the more I want them to come to my feeder or near me, the less likely I am to get them. And so I have that sculpture here with the little crow hat kind of on her, kind of thinking about dressing like the crow or having the hat on like the crow. I've been trying. I just don't know why it is that they're avoiding me because like so many artists here have said that you see them everywhere. And indeed you do. And I hear them. I just can't get them to come to my feeders, even though I put food out for the crows. So that is my story about these things that I'm making.
So this is kind of a self-portrait of you, trying to dress like a crow to attract them. Well, that's just,
yes,
that's great.
I tried.
Yeah.
It isn't successful.
No, it's great. And the skirt, it would be the perfect, skirt to wear with Craig Clifford's bird shirt.
I have my own bird shirt on. You just can't really see it that well.
Oh, fantastic.
I gave it a whirl.
Oh, well, great. Well, this is just it's a great piece, Wendy. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is Tim O'Neill. After a professional career as a studio furniture maker, O'Neill returned to academia to receive an MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, focusing on metalsmithing. He has exhibited his work in wood and metal across the country. He currently works as a 3D technician in sculpture, glass, and digital fabrication at UW-Madison and maintains a studio practice. You may also know him as my husband and the other owner of the Abel Contemporary Gallery. His most recent work involves foundry work combined with his woodworking and his other metal practice. So thank you, Tim, for joining us today. Tell us about your piece. Tim?
You're muted.
Tim, you're muted.
I'm sorry. First, I'd like to thank you for curating this marvelous show on corvids, and also these continuing virtual talks that present the artists and their work and their understanding of what they're doing in their studio and how they think about the artistic process. And I'd like to thank the other artists in this show as well. As you know, many of you know, I don't get to participate with too many shows. I'm quite busy like all of you, but I try and maintain a practice, and this piece is the most recent piece that I've made. And I was happy to be asked to be in this show. Crows, I've been interested in crows for a while. And both the intellectual properties that everyone has spoke about and their all their characteristics that we anthropomorphize and with the mysticism or magic, like John referred to, and just their abilities as a creature to survive in the world that we're in as well. And I'm really fascinated by that. I have made other pieces revolving around crows, and I think this is just kind of a continuation of that. And for me, it's this piece really came about because I have an emotional connection to a particular place. And that place happens to be Teresa and I own a one-room schoolhouse in southwestern Wisconsin. And originally it was my shop, and then we renovated it and it became our residence. So we had lived out there for 5 years. And so being in the country, it's quite sparse. There aren't a lot of houses around us. We're out in the middle of fields. And the one thing that I have this connection to this place is the sound of a crow calling in the distance. And I would hear that quite often. And that sound would just transfer across long distances. And it would just, my heart would just kind of just go into this very thoughtful and serene emotional connection to this animal. And it was kind of overwhelming at times. And so I think that's why I wanted to make this piece. I am an object maker. So this, and I have this thing about function. Like a lot of my furniture is very functional. It's not out there as far as conceptual work. It always has this function tied to it. And so I want to try and get away from that at times. And so this is actually a bell, but it functions as a metaphor for that sound, that call, the crow. In fact, I integrated that actual sound print. This is the sound signature of a crow calling in a distance. And it has this graphic quality. And it starts out on the left and it continues and then it fades, and then it fades into the feet of the crows, which make that body connection of both the head and the body to the feet. And so here I've drawn upon my metalsmithing skills to cut this out of sheet silver, and just to emphasize this idea of the sound that I'm drawn to. The other thing is, I was thinking that this is very unusual for me to add text to a piece. I'm not a poet. I don't, study poetry very much at all, but I felt this piece needed to have some mention of how I feel through language and how I can commit to my feelings about this creature. But in reality, that's not true. I've used text in my work for the last 20 years. It's just a different form. I've always been interested in archaeology and anthropology, in particular of Egyptians and Maya culture. And for a very long time, I've been creating my own hieroglyphics that are this kind of unknown language that people have to decipher. And I was drawn to that unknown. what's they're trying to communicate and what's out there. So the first piece I did with a crow actually had this carving that I do of all these symbols. And it really talked about the unknown and how we're trying to decipher both cultural things and creatures, of how they respond to each other, how they respond to us. And so, so this is just this culmination of a new idea for me that's really kind of spelling it out literally, of my thoughts and how I feel about it. So bear with me, I can explain what this is. So it says, the call is from those who scheme. It rang from my dreamless slumber. Is it love, not an omen? The black shadow has fooled me again. And it really responds to this idea of cleverness, this mystery, this magicalness, this trickery of this particular creature that I love so much. And I hope that it all kind of comes together, that people can understand what I'm trying to say about this piece.
It's beautiful. And just to make it really clear, maybe this is obvious, but this picture is the inside of the bell. So he had to wrap this text around inside. So it's really a special piece. Thank you, Tim. And that was a great explanation. I hope people can come and see all these pieces in person, or at least, study them more online. Next up is Alan Servas. For decades, Alan has been a well-respected professional artist known for his colored pencil drawings and casein paintings. He is well-published and has taught watercolor and color pencil workshops for over 20 years. These includes workshops in California, Washington, D.C., Arizona, Montana, the list goes on. In 1998, he was one of 2 artists selected to conduct a masterclass at the International Colored Pencil Society of America. His colored pencil drawings and watercolors have been exhibited nationally in juried exhibitions, galleries, museums, and colleges. Thank you for joining us, Alan, and tell us about your work.
First, this has been enlightening. It's nice to be kind of towards the end because I can hear all of these different things, and I don't have to say as much because I certainly, a lot of what the other artists have said has gone through my mind. As far as, especially about the corvid, the crows. I want to thank Lauren for inviting me to be a part of this show as well. It's been fun. I chose this piece to talk about briefly. I really don't have a lot to say about it. I live in the country with my wife, Gail, up here in, I guess it's considered northwestern Wisconsin, north central, just above Eau Claire. We have a small house on a lake here, and it's lovely. We don't see people very often. And crows have figured into my work. I first started becoming interested in them way back when we lived on a small farm, not that far from here, in the late 70s. And one day I was looking out the doors or the window or something, and I saw, it must have been at least 200 crows on, I believe it was in my memory, it's been 35 years ago, 30. I'd never seen such a mass of crows. There must have been 200 of them at least, or maybe even more. And I'd never heard of a murder of crows, but that was certainly a murder of crows. It certainly qualified. I became interested and I started reading about them, and I concur with a lot of the things that Lauren said, particularly earlier about them being very, in the end, in my work, they ended up being sort of metaphors for people because they have so many things in common with people, like shiny objects. They're mysterious. They group and yet they're loners. They have many of the same common traits that we do. As far as the piece goes, I've been fascinated with walking through the woods, which we do every day here. We have plenty of them around. And I've been captivated by the leaf litter on, especially in the fall. And I started working on this piece. I wanted to simplify it as much as possible. So I eliminated all the limbs on the trees figuring heavily on a lot of my work. They became more of these columns that just shoot straight up out of the leaf litter on the floor of the forest. And then I had this idea of making the crows, having the crows weave in and out. Now, I've never seen anything like this. I'm not sure crows would even do that. I've never, like I said, I've never observed it, but I thought, well, I'm going to have them just going through these trees. Hello, Sammy. Our dog. That's to pardon her.
Surprised this is the first time this is happening.
I'm sure. At least today. It's the FedEx man. Probably, hopefully, bringing my illustration board from Dick Blick. I don't have a lot to say about my process of drawing. I tend to make things up as I go along. This piece in particular, I just started with the large bowl, the largest tree, and then I work from there on out. And when I think it looks finished, it's finished. Then the crows went on, and I wanted to give it a feeling of that you're looking at a glimpse. That's why I have the one emerging from the left-hand side, just coming into the frame. And that's really about it. There's probably an apocryphal thing, and I can't remember who the artist was. Sargent, for some reason, sticks out in my mind as being asked by somebody about one of the skies in his paintings, and the viewer was saying, well, I've never seen a sky like that. And I like I said, I'm not really sure it was Sargent. It's been a while since I read this, but I love the quote. He said, well, you should have. And I guess that's the way I look at a lot of my work, is because they are made up and they're fantasies. Most of my work is, and they're places that I'd like to be at a moment in time. And that's really all I have to say about what I'm doing and about this piece. I enjoy the aspect, the idea of working. The composition is always first and foremost for me. I'm trying to make things work as a piece. I went to a workshop once, many, many years ago, a watercolor workshop by a very fine artist, Frank Webb, and he said, your piece should never point to the next one on the wall, which I was quite good. And so
wow.
I've tried to keep that in the back of my mind just right. And composition is always, a piece has to work mechanically. It has to hang together. And so I've, over the years, and by the way, I'll just take another minute. Kelly Connolly, I just thought I'd say hello to a fellow Montanan. I graduated from the University of Montana as well. I think probably before she did, many years ago. So anyhow, that's about it.
Fantastic. I feel like you don't meet a lot of Montanans out in the world. So Alan, so good to meet you.
I'm transplanted. Been here for a long time. I've actually spent more time in Wisconsin than growing up in Montana, but I've been here a lot, which tells you something about my age. So anyway.
Well, we've claimed you now, Alan. You're our own.
Well, it's nice being. I love Wisconsin, and it's not Montana, but they're just different. People say, how do you, and especially the driftless area. What a wonderful gift to us. So that's it.
Thank you, Alan. That's fabulous.
Just a quick anecdote about your colored pencils reminded me. I've spent a lot of time camping in the Rocky Mountains, in Rocky Mountain National Park, and with my mom. And on one trip, I had this giant box or tin of Prismacolor colored pencils sitting out on our camping table, and had walked away for some reason and looked back, and there was a whole group of a few magpies and a Stellar's jay all just going through my colored pencils, just kind of picking them up and looking at them like, what is this? And I soon became concerned that they would steal some of my art supplies. So since then I've had to use a elastic closure colored pencil thing just because they interest birds so much.
Especially crows.
Wow.
Yeah.
one last thing I'll say, it's interesting about colored pencil, and I noticed that I'm the only person actually in the gallery that works with colored pencil to this degree that I do. It's because it's a graphic. I've never, to me, the transition, I was doing watercolors for years and years. I still do. In fact, I'm teaching a workshop in watercolor this summer. But I handled the colored pencils much the way I handled the transparent watercolor, in that I don't use white. I just use the white of the paper. And I like the fact that it gets a quality of kind of a glow, an inner glow from the paper coming through a luminosity. So anyhow, little thing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Alan. All right, we're going to go back to the Clifford Kupinski household again and talk to Debbie Kupinski about her fabulous sculptures, and this one in particular that's in the exhibit. Debbie received her BFA from Kansas City Art Institute and her MFA from Louisiana State University. Her creative work often explores the way we mediate experience through objects and the intersection between the human and natural world. She has been a resident artist at the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts, the Appalachian Center for Crafts in Smithsville, Tennessee, and the Arts and Industry Program at Kohler in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Her work is in the permanent collection of the Long Beach Museum of Art and the Archie Bray Foundation, among others. She shows her work nationally, internationally, and regionally, and is currently an assistant professor in sculpture at St. Norbert College in De Pere, Wisconsin, and maintains a studio in Appleton. Thanks, Debbie, and tell us about your beautiful piece in the Crow Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh, Craig's got to turn his sound off with the echo there. Well, when I was invited to the show, I make a lot of birds and larger pieces that incorporate birds, and I have this installation that's it's like all these crappy wooden blocks that are just cut into squares, and then they have dowels, and they're just pine, and they have all these natural world elements, and it's like a large thing that you move through. And I was just thinking about this, making some smaller pieces that reflected that. I'm really interested in this idea of like the tactile also, and experience, and this sketching. And to me, these are like sketching in clay. Like when I went to Kohler, my work that I made there was, I took a walk on this sort of nature path next to the highway, and I just photographed and collected some stuff. And I find like walking is a way to really think about things, and we do a lot of walking here. And then it kind of occurred to me like, oh, I can like kind of make these really rapid prototype images of the things I see on the path, and then make multiples and sort of interchange them in different ways. It's kind of a way of like talking about an experience and memory, and transforming things through, making. A lot of ceramics is super tight and controlled and all about like process, and I just wanted to say, how quickly can I make these, and how can I make them very simple? So anyways, then I was like, well, I'll make little pieces, but maybe I'll just use some nicer wood. So that was my main idea. Maybe instead of junky wood, I will make nice wood. And I also am really drawn to like self-taught art. When I lived in Tennessee, there's this like really awesome town near it's near Nashville. It's like south of Nashville, called Bell Buckle. I mean, I went there probably in like the early thousands, so it was a while ago, but it just has all these antique malls and stuff and stores, and they have these birds. They're just like, they're soft like little pillows. They're bird size, and they just have one side and another side. They're not painted. They're just blank, like canvas shaped birds. And I just really like them. So to me, these are kind of my version of that. And I love things that I talk like about this with students all the time. Like, how much information do you need, like, for a viewer to be able to sort of put it together themselves? And I love the idea of like allowing viewers to sort of create something as they're looking at it. So the simplicity of it too is something that I was drawn to for that reason. And I also really love the pairing between like the material and like the warm wood, right? And the surfaces of that and those kind of conceptual implications of wood against this like material that's made of earth and how they come together. But we do a lot of walking down here by the river in Appleton. So these pieces in the show are kind of reflective of a lot of these thicket pieces and little birds and little things that are inserted into them, but in just a different simplified way.
Well, because you've synthesized them down.
Wait, I gotta turn the sound back on.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Because they've been synthesized down to this really simple forms. You're being really modest about them, but they start to look like icons, or maybe it's because Tim was just talking about hieroglyphics. And because the picture shows it in profile, they start to look like they're symbols or language.
Yeah, I like that idea, like glyphs.
Yeah.
Well, you know whose other work I think I took students down to Milwaukee, and they have like a little exhibit in Milwaukee Museum of Art of like self-taught art and folk art, and they have those pieces, that I think it's Lawrence Tolliver's wooden pieces. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's like I don't think he's alive. He was like an African-American, like kind of guy, wood carver, but they're kind of remind me of this. He has these beautiful, like, they're super simple, like Adam and Eve with this simplified tree, or like when I go to the Children's Museum and they have these like simplified nature that's all flattened in this like very sweet, weird way. But yeah, like that's like, I think how people, like you can read images almost like a language. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Or like toys, the ones that you like the bank where the bird comes and like eats the coin. And
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I just like playfulness too.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, they definitely don't seem serious. They seem playful and
yeah. But I think you can like when you work with the same images, like they can be playful or they can be serious depending on the context or how you approach them. And I mean, it's just nice to make things sometimes. I mean, we're people that make things, and I mean, I never really was serious with the wood. So I'm like, oh, like I have to actually, get this wood to like look nice and not be like, it's not just from the hardware store. Like I went to craft and bought it.
Yeah, it's amazing as an artist when you move outside to some other media, you think like, oh, this needs something else, and you go outside your comfort zone and you're like, oh, that's actually really hard. I never really learned how to do that.
Like I mean, I run an entire wood shop.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, there's not like right now we're not using it very much, and they make like bandsaw boxes and like they use like basswood and stuff, but I mean, I have all the tools and it's not like I can't do it, but it's just like, it's a different type of work than working. Like you can't, if you ding it or something, it's like, you kind of have to sand it down or start over or something. So you gotta be careful. Like you can't, it's different than ceramics.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Debbie.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It was great to be able to make them actually.
Well, we're so glad you did.
Yeah, well, thanks. And it was nice to see everyone else's work.
Yeah. So Lauren, were there any questions or anything?
I'm not seeing any on our Facebook feed, so.
Okay. All right. Well, I also, so this is taped. I realized today doing this in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday on a beautiful day that lots of people might decide to be outside and then watch this again later. So, but this is really great. So I don't know if any of you want to chat with each other for a minute before we go. Have anything you want to say or a question to each other? Or we all just want to get outside and get into the beautiful day.
Let's go see some crows.
Let's go outside and see some crows. Well, so I guess I'm going to wrap. Oh, Mary, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed hearing all of you speaking. Even though I was off camera for a little bit, I had some students come in because I'm at the studio, but I was listening, and I just really enjoyed hearing everyone's backstory to the work. And you know, thinking about some of the more philosophical approaches, like John's approach to space and, you know, our imagined selves. And it was just very thought provoking. It gave me a lot to think about. So thank you for sharing, everybody.
I'll
Yeah.
say too, it's very enriching to engage again with people. It seems like, even though, you know, I'm pretty used to Zoom conversations with my students and some friends and family as well, it's just being able to engage on a professional level and a level with peers is something I haven't done a lot, and it really was inspiring to hear everybody's stories and just reconnect and get to know some people I hadn't met before too. So it was much appreciated. Thanks for Abel Contemporary making this happen.
You're so welcome.
I'd like to say also that it's really fun, I think, to, you know, you can feel when you have worked a lot in making what you hope will be seen as art. And you know, you think you have a relatively trained eye to hear artists talk about their own work and see things that you sort of didn't fully appreciate. So for example, in Tim's talking about his piece, although I looked at it, I didn't pick up immediately on like the sound graph, you know, the sonograph thing that's part of the whole chord. And it's just, that's a rich touch. And the other thing in your piece, Tim, which I was impressed by, is that text is the most obvious sort of out there way to broadcast your thought or feeling about something, and you buried it inside one of the hardest places to see in your piece. And I love that. That's and with all of you, it's just, you know, been fun to hear various things. And Wendy, I was going to suggest that for you, if you want to bring in crows, maybe you should set out some McDonald's bags with some burgers. And I'd suggest also you might get better results if you put up a big sign that said "No crows allowed."
You're gonna have to follow up with us, Wendy, and try those things and let us know if it works.
You know, the reverse psychology just might work. Who knows? I mean, maybe I've been trying too hard. They're like, they're on to me. Or
yeah, what
they
is this lady
see
up
me
to?
Who see me navigating around the yard and they think, oh, that woman is a danger to herself. Maybe we'll leave her alone.
Oh, that's great. All right, so if Alan, or you just?
I was just going to say that my wife has been enjoying this. Gail's been listening to this whole thing on the other computer for the whole time, and she came over and said this has really been interesting to her. So just because of the last year and partly where we live, I haven't seen this many artists together in a long time. And artists by nature, you know, we're all loners, we have to be. And so it's quite interesting to see everybody's face. And I'm very pleased to be a part of this exhibition with such other really interesting, wonderful stuff. So everybody take care of themselves.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Al.
So if anybody, you know, I know this is, I will say that I have found every single one of you talking incredibly interesting. And like someone else just said, maybe it was John, I learned things that I don't know. And I've been spending time with the exhibit. I'm sure Anne and Lauren feel the same way. And it makes me more and more think like, come and see this show. These pieces are so really rich and interesting. So, so for anyone who's still tuned in the audience, just to remind you, the show is up through, my notes here, April 11th. And the gallery is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We are open to the public. You can come in, wear your mask. The space is huge, so we haven't had to limit the numbers of people. And then the show is also available online. And we will, you know, I think what I'll have Lauren do is send out maybe a link to this to all the artists afterwards if you want to share it with people, because I think this conversation has just been great. And people will be able to continue to watch this again. So thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Bye.